Hello and welcome to the UK Asian. My name is Viji Alles. Now, we are here at the Osborne Art Gallery in central London, a gallery that specialises in equestrian art. A very special reason why we are here. Now, as many of you know, 2014 marks the 400th anniversary of the beginning of formal relations between India and Great Britain. In 1614, King James I sent an envoy to the Mughal court of Emperor Jahangir, Sir Thomas Roe. The same year, a chaplain from the East India Company sent over an Indian man who was baptized as Peter in the city of London by King James I. Now, to mark this very special anniversary, the UK Asian is doing a series of profiles of people from individuals from both countries who have been inspired by the cultures of these two great nations. And today we're meeting a sculptor and an artist called Marcus Hodge, originally from Sussex, but who's been travelling to India for a number of years now, and capturing the beauty and glory and vibrancy of India in these magnificent portraits. We've got one here. Now, the actual painting of that is 2.5 meters long. That's at a horse fair in Balotra in Rajasthan. And that's one of many paintings by Marcus. I met Marcus at the gallery here in London. Marcus, thank you so much for joining us. Now, you've been, firstly tell me, how long have you been travelling to India?
I think probably the first time I made my first trip was probably about 18 years ago, so nearly is 20 years actually.
Nearly is 20 years.
The years zip by, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where does the fascination with India come from?
I don't know, I just think being British, we've got so much of India tied up in our sort of DNA and our past and our stories, whether it's anything at all. But for me particularly, it was part of my growing up. I was brought up by my grandparents. My grandmother's father, I think he helped run a flying school north of Delhi, and my grandfather met my grandmother when he used to go weekends off from the Navy and fly small tiger moths above the Himalayas.
Small tiger moths.
So they met out there, and two of their three children were born out there. And when I was being brought up by my grandparents, the house was full of Indian furniture and Indian stories, and invariably a Sunday lunch would be replaced by a curry and something wonderful and exotic. It was always there in the background of the fabric of my life, and then eventually, when I had the opportunity, I took my first trip out there, which is the first of I think 7 or even 8, I don't lost count, absolutely loved it. It's not an easy place to travel to. There are times when I'm there, and if somebody said, "Listen, this is the way, there's the plane, and you can go home now," I would run, But that's what makes it so wonderful, is the fact that it's challenging at times, very challenging and difficult.
And did you originally go with the intention of painting, or
completely?
Yeah,
absolutely. That was really it. I was offered my first one-man show in London, and I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And I wanted to do something that was a little bit different. And if there's a good reason to be a painter, it's part of it is the opportunity to get out there and explore and find exciting new situations. And I had read about some of these horse and cattle and camel fairs that they have in the Thar Desert, way out towards the Pakistan border, where you'll have enormous encampments and maybe 50,000 people, tents and fires, wood smoke burning into the evening sun, and camels and horses. And particularly the Marwari horse of Rajasthan interested me. And I went out for that, and the first one I went to was Pushkar, which wouldn't disappoint anybody. I think it's probably the most recognised of the fairs. It's where most of the tourists would go. But I flew out 4 days after the September the 11th Twin Towers attack, and the plane was half empty because people had cancelled en masse. And when I got to the Pushkar Camel Fair, a lot of the tourists that were booked for that and were expected were Americans, and they had just cancelled en masse. And so I turned up to this sort of, almost empty hotels, and there were entire areas of tents that had been set up and reserved for the Americans, empty, absolutely empty. So you can imagine they were really pleased to see me, and I was shown a fantastic time. And it's like stepping back in time. I mean, when you step out into that camel fair in the desert, there's nothing to tell you that you're in the 21st century. Everybody's in traditional dress. They're racing horses up and down. The dust is flying. The wood smoke burning. I mean, it's timeless, absolutely timeless. And I think in today's age, to find a little corner of today's world that can give you that is increasingly more difficult. It's harder to find. But I mean, it's fantastic. And even those have changed quite a lot in the years I've been there.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, obviously, these horse fairs and these cattle fairs, very important, part of the heritage of these areas of India. How have they actually changed in the time that you've been visiting them, in terms of participation by the locals, in terms of how they're celebrated, etc.? How have that changed?
Well, I mean, if you take Pushkar and maybe Balotra as well, that's your one time of year where a lot of very isolated, very rural people will come together to these various fairs, and it's where they do their trading, they're getting together, they're socialising, and so it's a big event for them. But I think probably the most the most visual thing that you notice has changed over the years, and less people are wearing the traditional clothing. So there's a lot more jeans and Western clothing now, and that's actually a very big visual impact, because one of the great things was when you were first arriving in India.
It's the costume, isn't it? Yes.
But the thing you notice most out there is when you arrive in India, if you're in any of the sort of cities or the more urban areas, those are changing exponentially. I mean, they change so much. Jaipur hardly has any animals and livestock in it now. I think 80% were killed in 3 years of drought anyway. But they are being moved out, and it's a very, very modern, thriving, buzzing city. It's nothing like it was when I first arrived. But the rural areas, no, they don't change quite so fast. But give it time. I mean, everything is changing. I think to all intents and purposes out there, they're having a sort of dual economy going with the sort of rural and urban areas. I think the urban areas are getting maybe slightly left behind. But so you don't quite notice the change there. But long may that last. I love going out and seeing those places. So.
Yeah. But the horse fairs and the kind of the equestrian-centric paintings that we've got here at the gallery, especially, that's not the only thing that's inspired you.
No, the people. The landscape is amazing and varied. I mean, we've got the landscape, the people, the culture. Going out just. It's things on a very grand scale, obviously, to see some of the biggest monuments and most beautiful architecture in the world. But also just on a very, very small and personal level, the little things that happen out there are lovely. And the first time I went out there, right at the very end of my trip, I was introduced to it's a small family-run orphanage for girls only in the suburbs of Jaipur, and loved it, fell in love with it, and immediately got involved by becoming a sponsor parent. But then very quickly my in-laws, my parents-in-law and my wife and I got involved and became trustees. And now we've sort of built up a sort of 12 English families who sponsor girls in that home. And it's some of the girls who, when I started, were sort of knee-high and age-born. My particular little girl, Sita, she was 8 at the time. She's now at college studying journalism and communications. We've had our first girl who's got her master's degree, which has been an absolute blessing. But so that there were times when I thought, well, I won't probably go back to India to paint. There are so many places in the world. But of course, that slightly keeps drawing me back. And there are times when you've been to India for quite a while, and you come back and you're sort of, it's exhausting. I mean, it's a place that enriches you enormously, gives you incredible amounts of energy and inspiration. But you come back feeling sort of exhausted, empty, completely needing to recharge. Sometimes thinking, God, parts of that were awful. I'm never ever going back in. And then about a year later, I start feeling homesick. Yeah. And I start thinking, and of course the work with the Shiva Baldon girls, Home for Girls, has drawn us back to that particular area. So I mean, it's a relationship that I think will continue because we're heavily involved in that now. So I'm hoping to sort of marry the art and the work with the home together at some stage.
Well, we'll actually come to that in slightly greater detail in a little bit. But how has interest? Now there is a tremendous amount of interest in, for instance, Indian contemporary art, Christie's and Sotheby's. Everybody's doing a lot of sales, etc. And pieces are going for often millions and millions of dollars, crazy money. But what kind of interest was there when you first started creating these artworks, and how has that interest developed? Who are your buyers? Are they members of the British Asian community? Are they, British people? How's that developed?
It's interesting because I had the first show I was offered in London. It was a gallery in Broad Street, and I got all excited about this trip. And I went out to India, and I came back, and I was working up an absolute storm in the studio. And then I had a slight crisis of confidence. I was sort of halfway through the show, and I thought, oh, good Lord, who's going to buy this stuff? You know, this is kind of a little bit off on a tangent for probably most of my core clients, and so I went up to Scotland, and instead of committing myself wholeheartedly to just doing an entire exhibition on this, I sort of slightly hedged my bets. I went up to Scotland and we did a whole load of, you know, I love travelling out to the middle of nowhere and painting landscapes, and came back with this sense that, you know, at least I've slightly, you know, covered myself here, and came back to the exhibition, and of course all the Indian stuff sold. All of it. It was amazing. Everybody kept coming. We love the colour and the exoticness. Now, who bought it? Very, very few Indian clients. Now, they tend to be a lot of, you know, the English clients, but it was amazing. Everybody seemed to have a connection. You know, their grandfather was in the Raj, or, you know, something to do with tea plantations in Assam, or for some people, just as simple as the fact that, you know, stories of India and the Jungle Book and Kipling are just part of the DNA of what it is to grow up in England. You know, it's just in us, and they were really drawn to it. And so, on the kind of back of that excitement, I said, well, you know, I love it. I'll go back. And so we did, and we kept going. But it surprised me. It surprised me. But to date, you know, very few Indian clients have come back. But I think as the country is changing and people are recognising that going out there and going to these places and painting from these sort of occasions and scenes, I think that's becoming more relevant because it is something that we are watching display. An example of that is I go to Ranthambore Tiger Reserve, because my father's a wildlife artist, so he knew some of the people who ran that. Now that is that is right on the cutting edge of how things are changing. You know, there are moments when you think India as a subcontinent is on the cusp of losing one of the most beautiful iconic animals, one of the symbols of the country, which would be a tragedy if it happens. And to go to that place and see how they are managing in unbelievably difficult circumstances, as the human, you know, pressure of population is just bearing down on these 400-500 hectares. How they're trying to maintain that biodiversity and keep that animal going is just absolutely amazing. But you know, they do, but they need help. You know, it's a constant battle against the pressures for poaching and hunting and things like that. So.
I suppose the other challenge that you face, and as I look through your paintings, I suppose your style would be described as impressionist. There's a very inherent kind of beauty and to the paintings, and yet you live in a context, you live in an age where, you know, an unmade bed goes for $2 million or whatever it is. How much of a challenge is that, and, you know, in terms of selling your artwork, and you know, what would your advice, for instance, be to you know, a budding young artist?
You know, I don't think that affects anything that I particularly do. I think there's room for everything, and I find some of the, you know, contemporary work really exciting, and you know, it's always been interesting to see that as we've gone through sort of 8 years of worldwide austerity, that, you know, the top end of the art market has just been, I mean, just booming, absolutely booming, breaking records every single week, it seems. And the sort of, you know, the wealthy of the world are able and loving spending money in ever greater amounts on whatever, whether it's property, fine art, sculpture, unmade beds, whatever. But I'd say that, you know, it's quite, you know, learning to paint it takes time, it takes dedication. Finding your own style takes time and dedication too. You know, my advice to anyone starting is, you know, just prepare yourself for the fact that, you know, 99% of this is perspiration, hard work and graft. And it's inherent in the task of learning to do it every day, is dealing with the disappointment that you're always trying to get something more, but enjoy the journey. You know, life's short, so, you know, don't beat yourself up too much. Just enjoy it, enjoy the challenge. It's a wonderful puzzle to be thinking about and working out. You know, you don't do it when you're just in the studio. It's like a bug that's bugging you 24 hours a day. You're always sizing things up and looking at them, thinking how you might be painting that. But I think the other thing is that we've moved, you know, into a more technological age, and you know, photography and imagery is just everywhere. That actually traditional oil painting now, you can't beat it. It's fantastic. You know, it's, you know, I feel like I'm in a world where I'm doing something, one of the few things that just can't be replaced by a click of a button. Something. It's very personal, you know, it's never been a journey that's been about the money. I mean, I did a degree in economics and business studies at the University of London, and then I'd done that to try and study art. You know, I feel very lucky I'm making a living at it. So it's just about, it's a wonderful journey to enjoy and inquire and digest life through the medium of sculpture and painting. It's great.
Is there an area in India that you haven't visited and would love to go and paint?
Yeah, so many.
So many. Too many, I suppose.
I mean, too many. I mean, so many. Yeah. I mean, I because of our connection to the Home for Girls in Jaipur, I have tended to kept going back to that one particular area. But from the wonderful foothills of the Himalayas to dozens and dozens of places. I have a list of all these places and various fairs and celebratory events that I want to visit. So, but that's this time you have to go through these things slowly.
And tell me about the charity work that's kind of grown out of your travels to India, and how you kind of going to marry your work with the charity work.
Well, it's just been on a fairly low key scale up to we have a lovely girl Sita that we sponsored out for many years, and she's coming towards the end of her time at the home because she's now at college, and then she will find her independence soon, and she's looking for jobs. And but we're still trustees with my parents-in-law of the home, and my mother and father-in-law have done an amazing job driving fundraising through. I mean, rich parties over weekends. I mean, so many events that they've organised, and they've had some very generous people around the heart of Gloucestershire who have supported and donated to this home. But it's constantly, you're needing constantly to look for ways to keep renewing that. And I suppose I'm aware that, as they get on a bit, that the responsibility will slightly begin to fall to myself and my wife. And I don't play bridge.
Yes.
So what I'm wanting to do is to marry the art and that project together. And I have a particular project I've been thinking about for a number of years called Deck in India, which is travelling around the subcontinent of India and in a series of 10 very large canvases and sculptures, trying to get a little bit of the sort of geographical, cultural, ethnic diversity of the country, which is an impossible challenge in itself, and with the opportunity of limited editions, 10 limited editions of all the paintings and prints and sculptures, using that as a way to fundraise and create hopefully a good little sort of pot of money that we could invest and keep the home going in perpetuity. So
where is the home based?
It is in the suburbs, our suburbs of a place called Hanuman Nagar in Jaipur, Pink City in Rajasthan. So it's a very pretty little house, a very pretty little garden in the suburbs, and
quite apart from organising.
Never find it.
I mean, quite apart from organising bridge parties or fundraising here or elsewhere, I'm sure there are a myriad other problems that you run into in terms of doing a charitable project in India. What kind of issues have you faced?
I mean, again, I haven't really, I haven't been at the sharp end, so I haven't had to particularly do it myself. This has been down to my wonderful in-laws. But I know that since the Mumbai attacks, that getting money into India for projects like that has become more difficult. So you are at times dealing with some rather long-winded Indian red tape. But if you're patient and you just have to keep following the things you're told, and you get it done in the end. That side of things, just organising that is one thing. But there haven't been any too great difficulties. I mean, the different girls who are different ages, bring different challenges and different difficulties depending on what their background is and how they are educationally and everything. But I would say that it's just been a lot of fun, a lot of joy. I took my 2 children out 2 years ago, so that they would have the opportunity to see it firsthand, me see it firsthand, because they've been communicating for years.
How old are they?
Their daughter's 17, Clara, and Freddie is 15 now.
Right.
So a few years younger. So for them to meet the kids, and we stayed, 4 of us, my wife and the 2 children and I, at the home for Christmas. We stayed at Christmas, and we had a little Christmas tree, and we celebrated Christmas with them, which was a lot of fun. Because the personal visits are important if you can. I think most sponsor parents there will visit probably once or twice, because a lot of them are Canadian and English. It's a long way. it's difficult. But so I think Sita has been particularly lucky because I think between myself and my mother-in-law and father-in-law, she's had, it must be nearly 20 visits now. So she gets all the attention. But it's been great. It's been a real pleasure.
I suppose it's easier as a as a philanthropist to kind of adopt a particular girl or a particular family rather than setting up a direct debit to make a donation every month to Save the Children or whatever it is. Having said that, I don't know Save the Children does a lot of great work in India, but that kind of personal connection directly to the person that you're helping, that makes it easier.
Yeah, no, it makes it much more enjoyable as well. I mean, that was the real attraction of it at the very, very beginning. That it's a very small, family-run little organisation. There's no administrative cost. Like, if you give £10 is there and being spent, at the sharp end for those girls, and that was particularly attractive. The other part of it that I like particularly was that it is, it's very personal in the sense that you really get to know the people who run it and your sponsor child and all the other children. They're all sisters there. And a lot of letters written, and constantly, you're getting sort of letters of how they're doing at the colleges and who's doing what and where they're going, and what pressures and difficulties or successes they're having. So it's a very, very personal little project, and not something that you just write a check and forget about. You rather you do get slightly entangled in it. But I think that's the fun there. The other thing is that a lot of people said, sometimes think it would be lovely to sort of sponsor these kids and adopt them or something. But you're really investing in a country that's given you a great deal of pleasure. In the sense that hopefully all these children are going to be well balanced, well educated, get out there and do well to create something substantial for their own country. So they come from
and their country
difficult backgrounds, but actually they're when you go out there and you go to a home where these girls are all looked after beautifully and it's lovely called home, and they go to a little private school and then they go to college if they can get to it, you actually realise that they're incredibly lucky. They're incredibly lucky. You've only got to go on the street to realise how lucky they are.
Absolutely.
But you also know that education for them is their absolute key to freedom. They are Jyoti, where he got for education, and was constantly helping on to the girls saying education is the road to your success. Will give you the liberty you're looking for, the future you're looking for, whatever you do. So they really study hard. I mean, amazingly hard. Yeah, constantly working.
Well, major exhibition coming up here at the Osborne Art Gallery in October. Tell us a little bit about that.
October 21st.
October 21st. Okay. What kind of pieces are you bringing to the gallery?
Probably going to have I should think it'll be about 35, 40 pieces. It's going to be a mixture of, there's going to be 4 or 5, 6 pieces of sculpture, which is, I think are having a lot of fun making those actually. Paintings and drawings and sculpture. Paintings, the loose idea of the background is it's horse landscape from various places. So I made another trip to India, and this time went to the Balotra horse fair, which is again out in the Thar Desert.
Yes.
And so we've got some pictures from that are building up, and then I went down. I was working as a sort of artist in residence for the Monte Carlo Circus down in Monaco, and that again is equestrian based. There were a lot of horses working in that. Been out to the stables, to Sheikh Mohammed's stables in Dubai. There's the Zabeel stables working out there, and the races there.
There's an Indian connection there as well, isn't it? Some horses from India? Or
no. Well, actually, the connection there is a connection, in fact, actually, because the trainer there, Satish, is from Gujarat.
Okay.
And he is one of India's main, he has some of the most important mares, Marwari horse mares.
Right.
And he's just bought a farm outside Jaipur.
Okay.
And he's bringing all his horses from Gujarat down to Jaipur, and he breeds Marwari horses. So there's been that really interesting connection, and actually we would like to go together to the Balotra, to the horse fair together.
Okay.
But no, that was just...
And Satish is a trainer at this world-famous Godolphin stable.
No, it's not Godolphin, it's Zabeel, but it's again in Sheikh Mohammed's, Sheikh Mohammed stables in the centre of Dubai. Then lastly, I'm here in England, just going to... spending a lot of time at the Windsor Racecourse, which I think is a fantastic little racecourse. Very kind of intimate and small, and you can really get close to the action and see a lot of stuff going on. So it's in progress is the answer, and if I knew exactly what the exhibition was going to be, it wouldn't be that interesting. I'm finding my way over the next few months.
Are you at liberty to prices at all? Or?
Yeah, I suppose so. I forget all things like that.
So for instance, just to kind of pan out to
easy because that's a standard pricing
right.
system.
Just to now, the Balotra, this one this is what we spoke about a bit earlier as well. That's 2 and a bit meters wide, an extraordinarily beautiful painting. How much would something like that go for?
That's very cheap.
Okay,
it's probably around £22,000. Yeah.
That is very cheap.
Well, it's funny. Money's a strange thing, isn't it?
Yes.
It's for the work that goes into it and all the cost and the travel
Absolutely.
and the time, and also remembering that for when you manage to have one canvas, which you really feel that you pulled off, 5 hit the bin. You know, that's part of the whole process of really kind of leaping into a painting. If you're careful, you can lose the magic. So you have to attack it with a certain freedom, and in that process, that means the balance between failure and success is always right there on your shoulder. And so for the ones that really work and you feel like that's just got it, there's a number that hit the bin. So I suppose you're factoring all that labour and time, disappointment and success into that. But the prices are not. I mean, the prices have been decided by the market. You know, they haven't been plucked out. I've been exhibiting and selling for 15 years now, nearly 20 years, and the work that we have sold over the years has set the price. You know, it has just been slowly following it. So hopefully you've got your price right. You're not suddenly just pulling the prices out of the hat.
True.
But that's a large one, so
that is a large
please
one.
don't think that everything costs that much.
No,
There's
of course
lots of
not.
things that are less expensive.
No. But that would be money very, very well spent. Marcus Hodge,
I think so. Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.